In my previous video, I gave the ISA the much coveted God tier status when it comes to building long-term wealth. But I got plenty of questions, what is an ISA and how can I use it? So in this video, we're going to be going through some of the key ISA basics and how you can be using it to build longer term wealth. This is going to be a video of two halves. The first is going to be talking about why investing is so important and how it can help you to build longer term wealth. And the second half is going to be, and therefore why the ISA is so important. So let's moneyball this. I think it's also fair to say that there is a lot of complexity when it comes to all of these different criteria and eligibility and the this and the that and the blah 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 blah. Some of this stuff is complicated. In my view, it's unnecessarily complicated, and that's really what we're going to try and distill in this video. And so right at the end of this video, I'm also going to be illustrating how I'm using ISAs to... So the first question obviously is, why should you be investing? And the short answer is, you can only trade your time for so many hours in a day at a particular fixed rate. And this is kind of limiting when it comes to building your wealth. So the key thing, the fundamental thing that investing does, is it puts your money to work for you so it can be working when you can't, or even better, whilst you're working as well. And one of the key things that will ultimately erode the value of your money over time is inflation. So if you put £10,000 into a bank account and you leave it there, let's just say you earn no interest, gradually over time, month by month, year by year, the value that that £10,000 has will erode over time. It will be able to buy you less stuff than it can now. And so one of the key things that investing will really do is it will help to beat that rate of inflation. This is something that we talked in a previous video, bullshit boomer financial advice you should definitely ignore, and I think this is it. You cannot just be saving for retirement, you need to be saving and investing for retirement. But I just want to make one thing very, very clear from the off, and that is, that doesn't mean that you should not save. I think it's perfectly reasonable to have a savings account to cover various things. Maybe you've got a savings account to cover your emergency fund, maybe you've got a separate savings account and that's how you budget for your holidays. This is not the death knell of the savings account. All I'm saying is that saving has its place in building your financial future, but so does investing. But the other key thing, the diamond in the rough when it comes to investing, is compound interest. So very, very quickly, compound interest is, let's just say you take your £10,000 that you had in your savings account and you decide to invest it. And the market on average will return between, it varies, but between 7 and 9% every year. And so what that means is that your money will grow, and then the next year your money will grow, but by your principal amount plus your previous interest. And so what you get is this exponential curve upwards. And that is really the power of compound interest. Now, you might be thinking, well, where the hell have you got this 7, 9, 8, 12, 14% average returns from? And the short answer is, historically, on average, the S&P 500, which is the top 500 companies in America, have typically earned between 7 and 9% every year. Now, some years it's down, some years it's up, so that is the average rate of return. We should be very, very clear about this. And when you look at the comparison for the FTSE, it's between 5, 6, sometimes 7%, depending on the time frame. And so that's what really the key thing is. Investing is not for your day-to-day transactions. Investing is there to cover your longer-term financial goals. And that's for two main reasons. The first is it's a greater time horizon for you to be able to make contributions to your investment account, but also it gives that compound interest just more time to work. And so let's just look at an example. If you put £150 a month into, let's just say, an investment account of some kind, we take our average growth rate of say 8%, and over a time period of 30 years you'll have £225,000 in that account. Pretty great, right? But you will have only made about £54,000 in contributions. The remaining £170,000 will have been the growth in the overall value of investments. And hopefully this diagram will really help to illustrate the importance of the compound interest and the interest that you earn over time, and therefore why investing is better than just saving for retirement. So I think one of the key things that you also need to be thinking about is there is what's kind of reasonably well documented is the risk return profile. So lower risk investments will basically yield a lower rate of return, and the same is true when you're looking at ISAs, but then higher risk investment decisions will lead to higher returns. Now, I think it's also worth mentioning that because we're talking about longer term financial investments, that it's very easy to get caught up in the ebbs and the flows and the ups and the downs, but that's not really what we're looking at. What we're looking at is the average return over a long time horizon. So just bear that in mind. So now we've talked about why investing is so important to building your longer term financial wealth. Now we come on to the second part of the video. What is the ISA and how can it help facilitate your journey? And is it effectively a tax-free wrapper which you can start to put all your various investments accounts in, but, and this is the key, this is the thing that gives it the God tier status when it comes to its importance when it comes to building longer term wealth. Any investments that you have that sit within an ISA will be exempt from tax. That's capital gains tax, that's income tax, that's dividend tax. And so it just means that if you think about how much of your money you give away every month in tax, to not have to pay that on income which is only going to grow over the longer term, key goods, absolutely key goods, like chaos will ensue. But there are a couple of caveats, as always, with such things. So the first thing is you can contribute up to £20,000 in your allowance every single year. This comes with two important caveats. The first is that your allowance doesn't roll over from prior years, so any unused balances, if you don't use it, you lose it. Cash ISAs. So the cash ISA is, like, let's just be real, it's basically a savings account, but it has also simultaneously made the savings account kind of redundant. So one of the things we talked about in our previous video is that now, depending on which income tax bracket you fall into, you get a personal savings allowance. So that's money you can earn from a savings account which won't be taxed. Now, one of the criticisms from the previous video is you still need to have, even though interest rates have gone up, you still need to have a lot of money sitting in a savings account in order to breach those thresholds. So that's the first thing. But what the cash ISA does is it means that any interest that you earn from your cash ISA is exempt from tax right off the bat. And so really it does kind of beg the question what a savings account ultimately will do, but no, that's another topic for another video. But at the same time, with interest rates having gone up, people are potentially breaching those thresholds, and so by putting your money into a cash ISA rather than having sitting it in a savings account, you can potentially save money on your taxes. Now, I think it's worth bearing a couple of things in mind. There are a few different types of cash ISA, so there's like the ISA, and then the cash ISAs are a kind of ISA, and then you've got different kinds of cash ISA. See what I mean about like unnecessary complexity? But there are a few different kinds of cash ISA. As we kind of talked about the risk-reward ratio, one of the things that you'll also find when it comes to cash ISAs is you have this kind of sliding scale. If you want quick access to your money every time, then that will basically give you the lowest possible rate of return or the lowest interest on your account. And if you're able to lock your money away for a longer time period, then that's going to guarantee you basically a higher rate of interest. Now, I think we should also probably worth mentioning things like car insurance, home insurance. When it comes to cash ISAs, I think there is a lot of value in shopping around and just keeping an eye on making sure that you are still meeting all the necessary criteria. There are all sorts of criteria about things like the amount of money you have in the ISA, how much you contribute every single month in order to qualify for different rates of interest. It can be very complicated, but just keep an eye on it every so often to make sure that you are maximising the value that you're getting from your particular cash ISA. And don't forget, you can just transfer it across if you find a better rate. Now we get to like the pinnacle, the peak, the one, the only, the stocks and shares ISA. In my view, one of the most important tools when it comes to building longer term financial freedom. And that is, again, for two main reasons. The first is it allows you to invest, and as we talked about earlier, the importance of investing in order to secure your financial future really cannot be overstated. And all the gains and all the income and all the dividends that you get from investing, tax free. Boom. Like, just end of the line. Cut, everything you need right there. And so what does the stocks and shares ISA do? Well, basically, it gives you the opportunity to invest in stocks and shares of individual companies. You can also invest in index funds or ETFs, which are a collection of stocks and shares of companies that sit within a single tradable security. Or you can trade in bonds, which are basically loans that have been made to governments around the world. Now, all of this is very complicated. This, I think, warrants its own separate video, which I will probably make. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Which, you know, let's save that for another time. But basically, it gives you the opportunity to participate and invest in all of these different mechanisms. They don't have to be very complicated. You can just buy a single individual global index fund, which will charge you very low fees. But the critical thing is that as you invest and as you build your portfolio over time, all the gains and all the income will be exempt from tax. Like, boom. Done deal. A great deal, if ever there was one. Now, when it comes to these discussions, there's often this ISA versus pension thing, blah, blah. Now, in my view, they are one of the things we talk about a lot on this channel is making sure you're using the right tool or the right financial instrument or the right budgeting method for your particular circumstances. And I think that's included when it comes to this debate between pensions and ISAs. In my view, your pension and ISA should be doing different things. But one of the big benefits that the ISA has over the pension is that there's no upper threshold. If you are someone who is contributing, if you're fortunate enough to be able to contribute the maximum £20,000 a year and you're investing over a 30-40 year time period, you know, the £1 million cap that you'll hit with pensions doesn't exist when it comes to ISAs. Now, one critical difference that we should probably highlight at this stage is you will earn a salary, you'll make pension contributions, which, as we know from previous videos like this one, are exempt from tax, and then but you'll get taxed on the other end basically. So when you start to draw money out of your pension, that's when you start to pay income tax. Lots of people say, oh, pensions are a scam because you're taxed twice. It's not true. But then when it comes to the ISA, you earn a salary, you pay tax on that salary, and then you make contributions. But once you pull money down from your ISA, unlike with a pension, that money isn't taxed. So it's a critical difference, which I think we really should illustrate. Both, in my view, both are long-term financial investment vehicles, but should be used differently. So use them differently and use them accordingly. Next is going to be the Lifetime ISA. So the Lifetime ISA was launched in 2017 to help younger people basically save for their first home or save for retirement, and basically the government will guarantee a 25% top up of all the money that you invest. Now this has a £4,000 per year contribution limit or allowance, so unlike all the other ISAs which have a £20,000 limit. We'll come onto allowances and limits later on in the video, but it can be a really kind of nice balance between the two. And the Lifetime ISA is a weird kind of halfway house. You have the cash Lifetime ISA, which works just like a cash ISA, including the government top up, and then you have a stocks and shares Lifetime ISA, again kind of combining the two, but it ends up, in my view, being kind of not very useful. There are also some criteria, so you can open it from the ages of 18 to 39 and you can pay into it until you're 50. So there's just those caveats to look out for, but you think there's caveats on the way in, there's also caveats on the way out when you want to try and pull your money out to use it. So when you're trying to pull your money out, there's even more caveats. So the first thing is it has to be going towards your first home, or you have to be over 60. So it goes back to this point of funding retirement or funding a first home. And if you want to, you can pull that money out, but you'll face a 25% penalty. Now there's all kinds of various campaigns. Martin Lewis has launched a campaign. It's a weird one. Personally, I have a Lifetime ISA. I don't necessarily view it as being overly useful. That's just my view. Next, I don't want to spend too long on this, but you have your Innovative Finance ISA. So this is basically like P2P funding. It's a bit weird. So you can, through an intermediary, you lend your money out to people, and any interest that you make as your return is tax-free. But from my perspective, you know, if the person obviously, or if you don't get that money back, then you'll just lose all of that money. So it is kind of higher risk than a lot of people make out that it is, which has always been a bit weird to me. So it's just another thing to bear in mind. Now basically the intermediary that you're lending in is called an IFISA. Okay, another acronym for us to decipher. And then we have the Junior ISA. Now I think the Junior ISA gets a bad rep for a few reasons. So a Junior ISA is basically an account you can open for a child or a dependent if you're a parent or legal guardian. Now you can open it for your children from as soon as they're born, and you can make contributions up to £9,000 a year. These contributions fall outside of your £20,000 a year ISA limit that applies to pretty much all the other ISAs except for one. And what this basically just means is you can invest on behalf of your kids, and you know, it just basically means, as with the stocks and shares ISA, you can invest in stocks and shares, and as the value of that pot grows, they won't pay any income or any capital gains tax on that money. Now, they can take control of their Junior ISA from the age of 16, and from the age of 18, it will completely transfer over to them. So let's just say you've put lots of money away for your kids to enjoy, to help them do responsible things with it. Yeah, I mean, I've got 2 boys, so responsible things would probably not be at the top of their priority list, so it's just something to bear in mind. But what it will basically do is when they turn 18, it will just convert into a fully fledged stocks and shares ISA. Now, the reason why people give the Junior ISA a bad name is because they say, well, and it's a fair criticism, just to be clear, they say, well, so if you put money into a Junior ISA, then basically that money cannot be accessed by you or the child until they turn 18. So people, the criticism is generally, if you're not maxing out your own personal ISA limit, then it's not worth having a Junior ISA. And that is a fair criticism. That's not the bit which I would contest necessarily. I have Junior ISAs for both of my kids. We covered this in another video, how to make your kids millionaires. And I think the important thing to bear in mind for me is that I like to have money in different pots. So I can just go onto my, obviously Vanguard, I can just go onto my ISA homepage and I can see, right, my eldest boy has got this much in his ISA, my youngest boy's got this much in his ISA, I've got this in my own personal ISA, and so it just offers that kind of level of separation. And again, sorry to plug another video, but this is something we talked about in another video about how to automate your finances, and I just think having separate accounts makes a lot of sense. We make monthly contributions every single month, and then we also make contributions on their birthday every year, and we basically view that money as being to help them get onto the property ladder, and if they decide to go to university, to help them go to university completely free, because you know, the rates on student loans right now are absolutely fucking insane, like proper wingnut shit. So whatever. And finally we have the British ISA. Now, I have been very critical of the British ISA in my other videos. I have got a bit of grief for it in the comments, but you know. And basically the British ISA means that even if you top your £20,000 ISA allowance, you can invest an additional £5,000 into British companies. Now, it should be very clear at this stage that there is still consultation going on. So if a country is based outside of the UK but they do most of their business in the UK, does that qualify? If a British company is based in the UK but does most of its business outside of the UK, does that qualify? So there's kind of a lot we don't know with this one, to be totally honest. My main criticism of it is that so few people even have a stocks and shares ISA. I think it's 3% of UK adults have a stocks and shares ISA, and less than half of those people maximise their £20,000 limit. So the idea that people need another £5,000 is just kind of a bit silly. So that's my main criticism. So when all is said and done, and for you nosy parkers out there, what do I do with my money? Well, the short answer is I make sure that I am maximising my pension contributions that my employer will match into my pension. Then I have a stocks and shares ISA. I contribute monthly to this every single month, and just without fail, it's just, as in this video, it's another thing that's automated. And then I have 2 junior ISAs for both of my boys. As I said, money goes in there every month and every birthday. And the idea is that they're each doing a different thing. My pension is basically there to give that kind of more stable income for when I retire. The stocks and shares ISA I can afford to take a slightly higher risk on because I've got my pension. And then the junior ISA for the kids has a completely different purpose. And one of the things we talked about in the previous video, which I will always talk about, is making sure you're using the right account for the right financial objective. So hopefully we've covered absolutely everything you would ever need to know about why investing is a good idea, and therefore why the ISA can be such a powerful tool for you. We've covered all the ISAs, we've skipped over some of the details, but I think for the most part this is going to be really the introduction to help you decide which provider you're going to go with. Make sure you subscribe, because in our next video we're going to be going through some of our top ISA providers, from the god tier Warren Buffett style stuff all the way down to the, I don't know, like Bernie Madoff, I don't know. So we're going to be going through all the ISA providers and really drilling down into some of the ones that rock and some of the ones that absolutely are just proper stinkers. Thanks very much for watching. Peace.